Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all very much for coming to this meeting. It's open to the public, and a warm welcome to you all. My name's Councillor Simon Clement-Jones, and I'm chair of this local area committee. Before I ask the other councillors and officers to introduce themselves, I'll hand over to the committee clerk to read out the housekeeping arrangements.
Thank you, Chair. Before we start, there are just a few housekeeping arrangements to mention. Please can I request that mobile phones and other such equipment are switched off to silent mode so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting. There is no fire test planned for today. If there is an emergency evacuation, please take instruction from the council staff present. The assembly point is out through the main entrance, left and into the car park. The fire exits are to the back of me, round the curtain, or one at the front. The meeting today is open to the public and will be streamed live and for subsequent broadcast via the council's website. You should be aware that the council is a data controller under the Data Protection Act. Data collected during the webcast will be retained in accordance with the council's published policy. By entering the meeting room, you are consenting to be filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting. One final thing to mention, we have hearing loops available. If you would like to use one, please let us know. Also, we have Joseph and Catherine, who are BSL interpreters. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. If I can ask members and officers to introduce themselves, starting with Councillor Harris.
Yeah, I'm Steve Harris. I'm Councillor for Grace Park Ward.
Hello, I'm Councillor Sue Auckland, Councillor for Grace Park Ward.
Hi, I'm Councillor Ian Auckland. I also represent Grace Park Ward.
Hi, I'm Diane Owens. I'm the manager for the South Lack.
Hello, I'm Richard Shaw, one of the councillors for Beechif and Greenhill Ward.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor Kate MacDonald and I represent Littlest Valley Ward.
Hello everyone, I'm Alexi Diamond, I represent Littlest Valley Ward.
Good evening, I'm Peter Garbett. I represent Nether Edge and Sherrow Ward.
Good evening, I'm Nick Hamilton, Head of Communities for Sheffield City Council.
Thank you all very much. Thank you all very much for coming. So before we get on with the meeting, I'll just go through. Oh, sorry.
Sorry I'm late everybody, I'm Paul Turpin, one of the Green Councillors for Littlest Valley.
Apologies, Councillor Turpin. So just to explain exactly how the meeting's going to work, we'll go through kind of the usual business of the meeting, the minutes and of my last meeting and all that kind of stuff. Hopefully that won't take very long. Then there'll be two presentations, one on the transition to a committee system. Unfortunately, the officer who was going to present that can't be here today, so we do have somebody to come in at the last minute. Unfortunately, I don't think it can be quite as full a presentation as we hoped, but we'll do our best. Another then presentation on the South local area local plan. Following that, we'll be having both of those will involve a time for public questions, and then we'll be asked to we'll agree the plan as kind of legally and then vote on it. The formal meeting will then close, hopefully in kind of an hour and a bit's time, and then there'll be the opportunity to take part in. We don't know quite how many workshops. There's a good turnout tonight, so hopefully we'll get some good stuff going there to discuss the key themes coming out of the community plan. So obviously this is our first go. We now need to find out how we're going to actually implement it, what your thoughts on the plan are, and where we go from here, and then just get back together to gather a bit of feedback and talk through next steps. So thank you very much for coming. As I say, do we have any apologies for absence? I have just had one from Councillor Teal.
Sorry, I've had indication from Councillor Maroof Rauf that he may well arrive quite late.
Okay, thank you very much. No further apologies. Then exclusion of the press and public. There are no items that require us to exclude the press or public. Then declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. So just to move to the minutes of the meeting, I don't plan to go through them. If we can perhaps agree them as a true record, unless anybody would like to say otherwise. Great, thank you all very much indeed. Pardon? Oh, this one here. So we've done minutes of the previous meeting. So now the part of the meeting where we ask for any public questions from the floor. When you do ask questions, please can you come to the microphone to actually ask your question, so we can hear you and the camera can see you. If you don't want to be on camera, do please let us know, and obviously we can move the microphone to you. So does anybody have any questions? Thank you. If you could come to the microphone. If anyone else would like to indicate, so that we can kind of get ready. So that's the camera. It's just there. And then if you press the button and then talk.
Okay. Yes. A few years ago, I asked the council, wrote to the council, and they wrote back to me regarding where I live on. I live on Folds Lane. To put in 20-mile-an-hour speed limits on Folds and the Dale Woods. This was about 5 years ago, and they've never got back to me. So I was absolutely shocked to see that the roads up here, Green Hill, which I don't come up to very often, Green Hill Avenue and the other the roads that are around about, have all got 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. So I think it's about time, because on Folds Lane especially, we have cars going not 30 but 40, 45 miles an hour, and it's very, very dangerous. My daughter lives in Bristol, and the whole city is 20 miles an hour, and it has improved the life of that city enormously. So I'd like some action on that, please.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for your question. In terms of that 20 mile an hour zone, I don't know the ins and outs of where it's at. Certainly what we'll do is find out where it is at and let you know. And get back to you. I take interesting thought on global 20 miles an hour zone. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Anybody else got a question? Thank you. If you'd like to come to the microphone. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Callum from Shire Ward. I've come today primarily because I'm quite concerned about the level of littering around the street where I live. I've been talking to Peter about this on Twitter. Not the best medium always. Essentially, I live on Vincent Road, next to the Lansdowne estate. There's a huge ongoing problem with litter in the area. I know that Peter's been doing some things to try and combat fly tipping, but the problem is by no means solved. Fly tipping is not the root cause of the issue. The root cause of the issue is that there are simply not enough bins on the Lansdowne estate. Talking to the Tenants and Residents Association, they've been trying to get more bins for over a decade with no significant response. And the reason there aren't enough bins is because when the number of bins were planned, it was assumed that all of the houses and flats on that estate only were single occupancy dwellings, and they're not. They're 2 and 3 bedroom properties. Peter's told me that to sort out the litter problem is simply too expensive. I've had a little bit of a look at whether anybody's even tried to cost how much it would cost. I couldn't find any evidence of that. I've put in a Freedom of Information request to the council, but it's not yet been answered. And it seems to me that it's not really a question of costs, it's a question of priorities. And I appreciate what you've done on it, Peter, but I wonder if you lived on my street whether cost would be such a barrier, or whether actually suddenly the cost might not seem so much of an issue. So my question is, what can be done to improve the litter situation? Do you know how much it costs? And if you don't know how much it costs, why not? And can we find out? And can we see this keeping our streets clean, particularly in the areas that are prone to a significant problem? Can we see this being more of a priority, please?
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed for your question. And so from the notes that you're getting, I think, from around the table, we do certainly recognise that it's a priority, and it's certainly recognised in our local plan. I don't know if any of my colleagues want to make any contributions, but certainly from the local area committees perspective, we can certainly look into the questions that you've asked in terms of the specifics, in terms of how much it costs. And certainly one of the things is if local communities do want to take action and do something about it and want to say this, then certainly the local area committees come to us. That's, I think, partly what we're here for. We need to unstick what's going on at Sheffield City Council, and hopefully we can be the bridge to get these things done. So thank you very much indeed. And if we have your contact details, then we get back in touch and let you know what's going on.
Yeah, I'll pass it on.
Great, thank you very much indeed. If you'd like to come. Just to say, I think if we can limit this to get to past, if we get through the questions, but thank you all very much.
Right, I'd first like to echo the former speaker who was talking about 20-mile-an-hour zones. That's something that we would very, very much want. There's a comment that using the phrase "where appropriate" gives an opt-out for just about anything. I live on a street which has a huge amount of traffic for a residential street, a lot of which is diesel powered. I know because they're traders and so on, and they come in vans, and we really want a 20-mile-an-hour zone in order to reduce the pollution and to make it safer. It's a very dangerous road. There's also an issue, again concerning pollution, about raising awareness about pollution around schools and road closures and stopping people from parking around the entrances to schools. I know that there are some schools that have benefited already, and I'm very pleased about the work that has already been done, but more needs to be done about that. And finally, there are issues about housing. One of the things that doesn't come into the draft community plan is any reference to rented housing, either private or council housing, public sector housing. Now, some of the consequences of this are well outside the LAC funding, of course, but nevertheless, there should be an issue around repairs. There's a long-standing issue about repairs not being carried out in council properties, or at least being hugely delayed. And I think the LAC should be making a great fuss about this. It affects a lot of areas, our Lansdowne estate, but also Gleadless Valley, I know has suffered a lot, and I'm sure there are other areas. But when we come to private rented housing, then extending and enforcing improvements to private rented housing, such as has been done on the Abbeydale corridor, really should continue and be increased. There are areas on either side of that corridor, for example, where there should be licensing of the private houses. People, most of those of us in this hall either own our own properties or we live in nice rented accommodation. And people who don't are the people that we should be looking out for. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Excuse me. So I don't know if my colleagues have any comments on any of the points that you've made, but certainly in the parking on schools, I know myself and my colleagues are very keen to make sure that our roads are safe, but especially around our schools. And I know that we want to work with all of the schools to get them up to the right standards so that we can and will encourage them where we can. In terms of housing, it has been a bit of a debate, I think, in terms of the scope of the local area committee plan, the local plan. So, and I think, certainly I've been campaigning for as long as I can remember in recent memory, in terms of what's going on in terms of housing repairs, private housing in Beachford Green, and I know that my other colleagues are doing all that they can to support people with that. And I think it is a council problem. I generally don't think that it is something that the local area committees can usefully get involved in at the moment. I think we've done a lot of consultation with people, with groups, and tried to find out exactly what those priorities are. And obviously, housing has come through in that. But as I say, in terms of what we can do, in terms of the doable over the next 2 years, which I guess is what we're hoping to do in the plan, I think we as councillors have to be doing that at the higher level rather than through the local area committee. But thank you very much indeed for your question.
Chair, can I come in?
Of course, yes.
Yes. It's worth letting you know that any issues that you raise here will be passed on to the appropriate committee when the committee system comes in, which will be in May, June area time. In the meantime, we'll pass it to the relevant member of the executive. So all the issues that you've raised today, thank you very, very much for raising them. That's exactly what this forum is for. They will be passed on to the relevant departments. Whether that will speed things up or not, we have yet to see. But if you come here and raise it, that is one of the reasons for having the LACs. So keep on coming, keep on saying these things, because it will hopefully put enough pressure on to get the things moving on the things we want to see improved. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Do you have another question? Great. So if we can move on to the first of our presentations, which is Sheffield's transition to a committee system, presented by Craig Rogerson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm Craig Rogerson from Democratic Services. Unfortunately, Gillian Duckworth, the Director of Legal and Governance, she's had to attend to a very urgent family matter this afternoon, so I'm stepping in and I'm going to try to briefly cover the presentation. It might not be as in-depth as Gillian would have been, but I'll hang around at the end. If anybody's got any questions, please come and ask me, and if I can't answer, I'll get you a response. Do you want to just flick up the presentation? So, where are we now? The context. So, in May 21, there was a public referendum, and the Sheffield public voted to change the council's governance structure. At the minute, we have an executive, a co-op executive, a scrutiny and transitional committees. We're now going to move to a committee system, and that's going to happen, as Councillor Garbutt referred to, in May. Local area committees were created back in May 21. It's intended that they will still continue. Since the referendum result, there's been a lot of evidence gathering and work to design the new committee system, and a public inquiry. There's been regular meetings of the governance committee as well. So the aim of all this is to put the voice of of residents at the heart of the decision making. So that's what we're trying to achieve. The shape of the new committee system, that will be determined by council very shortly, but it's worth noting that that might not be what we end up with. That can change as we move along. So what have we got at the minute? So at the minute we've got a leader and cabinet model, and at its most basic level all we're changing is that circle bit, the leader and cabinet part. So the new model will replace the leader and cabinet with multiple new committees. So there's a lot, as I mentioned, a lot of activity being undertaken with stakeholders, campaign groups, community groups, members of the public, and as I said, the governance committee has been doing a lot of work on this. This all started back in the autumn. And I think it's clear, the message is loud and clear, that we need to do things differently, and there's an expectation that decision making will be done in a different way. So the detail's not final yet. There's a full council meeting next Wednesday at 2 o'clock. They will make a final decision. But here's a little insight of what potentially they may decide. Now, I know it's very difficult to read that because it's really small, so I can make these slides available on the web page so that you can have a look at them, or we can email them to you, no problem at all. I'm going to zoom into the bit on the left there, because that's the important part. That's the bit that's changing. A little bit blurry, but basically that's what we've got now. That's the Co-op Exec, they're the scrutiny committees, and they're the transitional committees that we've also had this year. So that's all going to be replaced by a new system. It's going to clear away the Co-op Exec and scrutiny, and we're going to have a number of new committees. And as you can see up there, there's the proposed new policy committees. You can just about read those. That might change at council, but at the minute that's what's proposed. Those committees will be cross-party. They'll be politically proportionate, reflecting the overall balance of the council. And what that means is that, you know, all members, all groups are involved in the decision making. So here's the whole picture. Again, very difficult to see, but you'll see the main changes are on the left there. The local area committees remain where they are. They will have a direct report into full council, and they can also, as Councillor Garbett referred to, refer stuff into those policy committees where they decide they want to send stuff. And if LACs want any further powers or request any further powers, that will be up to full council to decide that. So what's changing in terms of the LACs? They will continue and they'll develop as they have been developing. That new committee system doesn't change that. As I mentioned, they can refer issues to the policy committee. The big change here is the new policy committees, which will be cross-party, as I mentioned, and politically proportionate. So the final two slides, I'm not going to go into a lot of details on these because there's a lot of words up there, but as one of the outcomes of all the consultation work that's been done is to produce a public engagement toolkit. And I don't know if you can see that, but again I can share this, but there's lots of different ideas that have come forward there as possible ways of improving that public engagement. And then the final slide, again, there's some more detail there of looking ahead, public engagement plans, what the purpose of that is, the who and the how. So I'll leave it there, Chair, and then I can try and answer any questions now, but if anybody wants to come see me at the end, I'm quite happy to have a chat about that.
Thank you very much indeed, Craig, and thank you very much for stepping into the breach at the last minute. I can't see anybody with a burning question, so I think we'll move on.
Yeah, can I
go for it? Yes.
Yeah, I've been sitting on the governance committee, so Craig, you've done a brilliant job there, not having been around there. But again, if anybody's got any questions, I'm particularly keen on the public engagement bit, because I think we, as a council, have failed over a number of years properly to reach out and properly to engage the public where questions need answering. So I'm particularly interested in how we do that. The toolkit is quite exhaustive. There's a lot of different ways we can do it. Each committee will be deciding on an item-by-item basis how to engage the public, which members of the public to engage with, which organisations within the city are best placed, but also trying to make sure that we don't leave people out, because it's sometimes the usual suspects, in that sort of sense, that turn up to public engagement things, and we want to go beyond that. We want to make sure that everybody, or as many as possible, as many people as possible in Sheffield, actually know where to go, actually have the confidence to go and talk to these committees. I think that's the really, really important thing that these committees are going to be doing. The only other thing I'll say is that these committees will be taking the important decisions. This will no longer be down to to a single member taking decisions. These committees, with 7, 8, 9 people each on them, will be taking the decisions. So it's really important that people do engage. And as I say, that's what my focus over the next year is going to be. If you do have any questions, either ask Craig or myself on that.
I'm just wondering how the committees are structured, or how they're organised. How do the people on the committees choose themselves to go on it, or are they selected, or is it random?
So the chairs of the committees are elected by the council. Well, sorry, that's not quite how it works. So each committee essentially volunteer to go on it, and then each of those committees are then voted, the chairs and vice chairs, and then voted on by the members of that committee. So essentially, you self-select as to who goes on what committee. Generally, you'll be on 2 or 3, and as I say, within the members of that committee, they then elect the chair. So it is self-selecting, but you're expected to be on 2 or 3, as I say, as a councillor.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions? So we'll move on to the South Local Area Committee Community Plan. First with a presentation by Diane Owens, the South Local Area Manager.
Thank you, Chair. Right, okay. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about what's happened since January, I think, really, in terms of developing our plan. So I've talked to you a little bit about what's happened since January, since the public meeting we had in mid-January, in terms of developing the plan. I'll go through a little bit about what's actually in the plan and what it includes, although hopefully you've been able to have a look at the plan, because it did go out with the papers for the meeting, and then I'll just talk to you a little bit about next steps, really. So in terms of developing the plan, just need next, thank you. In terms of developing the plan, so obviously we had a public meeting in January, which some of you may have come along to or watched online, and at that meeting I shared the feedback that we'd had from the public engagement that we'd been doing. So we spoke to over 2,000 people and businesses in the area over the previous few months, and so we sort of pulled that together in terms of what that was telling us around important issues that the community were raising. And so I fed that back in January and went through that in a bit more detail about what those issues were, what some of the positive things were that people talked to us about, some of the strengths and some of the assets in the area, in terms of local businesses, in terms of local shopping districts, in terms of green spaces, but also some of the concerns people had as well, which some of them people have talked about tonight, actually, about speeding, about parking, and about the local things that concern people in their local area. So we went through that at that meeting, and since then, really, the members of this committee, we've been looking at that data and looking at what that information tells us, and also looking a little bit about some of the data sets that we have as well in terms of what that's telling us. And then we've had some further conversations as well with people. So over the last few weeks, in each of the wards, so each LAC covers 4 wards, 4 electoral wards. In each of the wards, we've done a session with some of the voluntary community sector organisations, who obviously are, really key partners as well in terms of how we're going to take forward some of the things in this plan, but also telling us what some of the feedback is from communities. So we did a session in each of the wards, talking to some of those community groups, and I know some people are here tonight. Thank you very much for your involvement in those sessions. So at those sessions, we went through a bit of a draft of the plan, and talked to people and sort of said, what does this look like? What do you think? What's your feedback in terms of what's here at the moment? So, you're right to move to my next. Thank you. This is all a bit blurry. So this is what the plan ended up sort of looking like a few weeks ago. So I was we're trying to capture those kind of comments and those feedback that we were getting from people. I ended up with this colour-coded plan based on on the 4 sessions that we did and which ward that session that comment had come from and where that feedback had come from. So it did end up looking a bit messy for a while with these comments all over them. So then we had a meeting with the members of this committee to go through those comments and through that feedback and make some changes to the plan based on that feedback. And we did make quite a lot of changes actually to the plan based on that feedback. One being, we had 5 themes at that point, and now we have 6. So one of the suggestions was actually to split out, so we'd put communities and employment and skills together, and the feedback was actually they need to be distinct. They're 2 different, there's quite distinct actions in there, so to split them out, and we've done that. And the other one was actually, one of the other things was just about actually how we laid the plan out. So we had started with, actually saying what the issues were, and actually the feedback was, well, can you actually talk about what you're looking to achieve, what the outcome, what the impact is at the start, rather than framing it around that kind of more in that negative sort of language around issues. Some of the feedback was about language. I think we talked a little bit more maybe about prevention and enforcement when we talked about things like litter and graffiti, and there was a bit of feedback saying actually we need to look at how we encourage the right behaviour and how we encourage positive behaviour. So we shaped some of the language around that, and there were some real specifics as well. Parking is an example where we talked about wanting to look at where the hotspots are in the area and are we working effectively in partnership to respond to those. And people had said to us, actually, we've got some real specific issues in our area about parking on grass verges and about blocking pavement. So we've put that in as a bit more of a specific. But I suppose this just comes with a caveat as well, as we know this is quite a high level, kind of plan, and it's kind of intended to be that way at the moment because it's a plan for the whole of the the South Lac, and we're trying to reflect back those issues that we've kind of heard. So it is quite high level, and we know that beneath that we will need to do more detailed work, and working with members of this committee, we'll want to have those conversations with you to work out where those hotspots are and where those particular issues are that we need to focus on. So we know that it is quite high level, but there will be a lot more detailed work behind each of those actions. There's almost there's an action plan behind each line in this plan. So just to kind of go through a little bit in terms of thanks. No, yeah, thank you. I'm loath to do the next slide, please, thing, but it's going to happen. So this is literally the contents page from the plan. So this is what's in the plan. So you get a bit of a sense about what the local area committees are about and what they're here to do, a little bit about the South Local Area Committee, so the members that make up that committee and the areas and neighbourhoods we cover. Then there's a little bit about the engagement, and there's a bit of an overview of the engagement work that we've done there. And then the detailed action plan is obviously contained within the plan there as well, and a bit of information about next steps. So tonight I didn't want to just go through the plan, as it sits in that document, because I thought I'd just sort of do a bit more of a summary, really, in terms of the outcomes that we're trying to achieve and what some of the actions are there in the plan. So I'll just take you through for each theme, really, some of those key actions, but all the detail is obviously there in the plan at the moment. So, as I said earlier, we have now got 6 themes in the plan, and the themes are up here on the screen behind me, and I'll just go through each one in a little bit of detail in terms of what we're looking to achieve. So, before I do that, actually, the other caveat comes with this is this is very much going to be about working in partnership. This plan, it's a community plan, and it will be very much dependent on working together with you as communities, with some of the community organisations who are in the room tonight, and others that are not, and with our partners. Our police colleagues are here tonight, but it's very much dependent on how working together. And some of the actions that we take forward in this plan will just be about, okay, how do we work together a little bit more effectively to make sure that resources are targeted where they need to be targeted. So some of it might just be about partnership working, some of it might be about looking at some of the devolved powers that the LAC has and how we use those powers. Some of it might be about using a little bit of the budget that the South LAC has to influence something. So that, the approach will depend on what the issue is and how we need to resolve it. So in terms of environment and green spaces, and I'm not going to go through all of this because it is all there in the plan, but you've got, it's quite blurry, isn't it? So I will, maybe I'll read out a little. It's quite blurry. So some of the outcomes we want to achieve around the environment and green spaces are about reducing litter and fly tipping, about a cleaner and more attractive environment, about reducing levels of graffiti and cleaner streets, and also looking at where we can increase biodiversity as well. So the actions that we've got around environment and green spaces, and I'm trying to summarise them here really, is we do want to do some work around graffiti hotspots. So we want to understand where those kind of hotspot areas are, and there's also an action in our plan to try and do some work with young people and do some street art projects there as well. So look at where there are maybe 3 or 4 key areas across the South Lac where we could do some work with and involving, you know, local young people to do some street art projects. We want to also do some work to look at fly tipping hotspots as well, and members have already been looking at pulling together a list of where some of the fly tipping hotspots are in the area, and that will include doing some work around the Lum and Gleadless Valley. We want to also look at litter and street cleaning hotspots. So again, you know, we've obviously had some information through tonight in terms of some concerns around the Lansdowne estate. So we want to be able to understand where those are, you know, where those issues are, the hotspots are, so we can do some work there. Looking at the opportunity to explore putting in some more nature corridors and some wildflower planting is in the plan, and continuing to support work around local parks and green spaces and also blue spaces. So that's a bit of a short summary of what's in there around the environment. In terms of transport and highways, we want to try and do some work to help reduce the number of, you know, complaints we have around parking from the local community and businesses, to try and improve satisfaction with public transport. Some of these things don't totally sit within the remit of the council, so it's about how we can influence sometimes. Looking at increasing levels of active travel, so we want to do some work around active travel and promoting active travel, including around schools. Improving health and well-being and improving access routes. So the actions alongside that are we want to work in partnership to look at how we respond to inappropriate and illegal parking, including, as I said earlier, about grass verges, pavements and cycle routes. We've already started to ask for some information from council services and parking about to try and understand where those hotspot areas are in our area. We want to share feedback that we get about public transport and transport routes. And we do get people dropping us emails as well as coming along to meetings like this with feedback. So we have got some feedback from the engagement work we did, and we get some feedback, as I say, all the time from people about issues. So public transport's one of the ones that we need to kind of go through our engagement and look at, you know, specifics there in terms of bus routes and particular issues. We want to support the use of active travel in the area, and also work in partnership to look at public rights of way to make sure they're well maintained and accessible. So that's the transport and highways. The next slide, thank you, is crime and community safety. So this is another one where we very much, you know, want to be working in partnership to respond to some of the concerns we heard. So that was about reducing levels of speeding, safer roads, reducing levels of crime and antisocial behaviour, and increasing feelings of safety. So one of the things that will happen through the LACs is we will have one of the vehicle activated signs, you know, the signs that kind of the electronic signs that flash up with the speed as you go past them. So we've got one of those per ward, and we've been working with members to look at identifying some of the areas where we're going to rotate those signs around. So each ward will have one of those vehicle activated signs, and hopefully from around April, May we'll start to get them out into the area. And they will stay in a spot for 10-12 weeks, and then they'll rotate and move around. So we've been working together with members to look at putting a list together for each ward about where they will go. We'll also look at where it's appropriate, looking at additional traffic calming measures, but that will be done, you know, based on a proper assessment in terms of where that's appropriate and where that's needed. We'll support community speed watch projects, and I know our colleagues from the police are already on with doing some work with that locally to try and get a community speed watch project set up and running. There's also work underway to set up 3 neighbourhood action groups for our area, so we will work on supporting those. So neighbourhood action groups bring together the police and partners and services from the council, and also representatives from community organisations to look at how you respond to local crime and community safety issues. So there's going to be 3 of those neighbourhood action groups set up within the South Lac area, so we will work to support those. And we also want to do some work around encouraging people to report crime, so we're going to do a bit of a project around that. The next one is around communities. The next theme is communities. So we want to look at how we can support community events and activities and increase community engagement and capacity, and increase awareness of local events and activities and volunteering. So we're going to, and some of these things are phrased around that language of explore, because we're not at a point of knowing exactly what we might do here yet, but we want to, explore that, and that's about working with people, working with yourselves and communities to understand what we need to do. So the action we've got in is around exploring the opportunity to provide additional community development capacity, to look at, to help support and develop community-led activities and engagement. And then also an action around working with local community organisations to encourage and promote the use of Sheffield Directory as a way of capturing local information. So we've had feedback about saying actually it's not always that easy to find out about what's happening and the groups that are active in the area and the activities. So we want to do a bit of a piece of work to try and get groups onto Sheffield Directory so we can use that as a base for where you find out local information, including about opportunities for volunteering. So the fifth theme that we've got is about employment and skills, and here this is about digital exclusion. Yeah? Could you speak a little more clearly? Yeah, I can try. Yeah, probably, maybe some more. So fifth theme is employment and skills. So we've got two outcomes here. One is about digital exclusion, about trying to help lower levels of digital exclusion, and the other is about ESOL, so English for speakers of other languages, so provision of ESOL classes in the area. So we've got two actions. One is to do some targeted work around digital exclusion. So working with partners to look at where we can do some projects around digital exclusion to support with skills development and people accessing employment. And the other action is around ESOL. So we've had some feedback from talking to community organisations and the community that there isn't a lot of ESOL provision in our area. So we're going to do some work to look at that, to understand, map that work, and then there might be an opportunity then to look at whether we need to look at some additional provision, but first we need to understand and get that benchmark of what there is already. So that's in our plans and action. The last theme is children, young people and families. So this has got a real focus around young people in particular, this section as it stands. So we want to understand the youth provision across the area, map that youth provision, both council provision and provision provided by partners, because we know the voluntary sector and faith sector do a fantastic job of providing youth activities. Look at increasing engagement with young people, and also look at some increased activities for young people, and also increasing our awareness and understanding of activities for children and families. So our specific actions are doing that partnership work to understand where the what youth provision there is and where the gaps might be, and understanding what the areas of highest need are. Supporting work to engage with young people to ensure their views are heard, and also looking at supporting work to help with connecting with children and families to improve communication and awareness. So I think there was a bit of a sense that people don't always know what's happening and what's on. Sometimes there are actually activities happening in the local area, so how do we help raise awareness of what's already out there? So that's the 6 themes and a very quick whistle-stop tour really of what's in the plan, but actually I have really taken you through the content really of the plan there. There is more detail obviously actually in the document, but really that has covered what the plan tries to achieve in terms of outcomes, and also what the actual thinking is around projects and activities. The next slide is just on budgets. This is a page in the plan, so you can see this. Yeah, you do have this properly in your agenda packs. So it just sort of confirms that the South Lac itself has a budget of £100,000 which it can use towards projects that are captured in the plan. We do also have a budget of around £57,000 for some work around fly tipping and graffiti. So that work I talked to you earlier about in terms of identifying those hotspots and looking at how we look at longer term prevention and potentially some graffiti projects. We've got a bit of a budget we can access for that. And then on here it all does also reference some of the budgets that are managed by ward councillors. So they don't sit under the LAC specifically, they're managed by ward councillors at a ward level. So each ward has a ward pot, and in the pack you'll be able to see the figures that is for each area, and also has an allocation of community infrastructure levy funding, which is linked to local development. So you've got that detail in your pack if you want to have a look at that detail. Finally, I'm not going to say very much more because I appreciate people may want to ask some questions. I've been talking for quite some time. Just in terms of next steps then, so basically yeah, as I said earlier, this is very much about partnership working. So we want to work with partners in terms of how we implement this plan. And we will continue to hold these meetings as well as part of, part of feeding back and reporting to people in terms of what's happening through the South Lac. So we'll hold a minimum of 4 of these meetings a year. But you can contact us outside of that as well, as a lot of you, I think, when people sort of have done, you can contact us by email, you can contact us by phone, and we obviously want to work with people as we develop these projects and implement these projects. And I think that's all I'll say from there. And as I say, this is also another lift of a page from the plan, so you have got the detail there if you need it. And I'll just finish on the last slide, which is how to get in touch with us. And again, these details are all in the plan, but yeah, if there's anything that you want to raise or talk to us about in terms of issues or concerns in your community, you can get in touch with us and talk to the team. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Great. Great. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for all your hard work on this and your team, and also thank you to the many hundreds of people who actually contributed to this as part of getting to this point. So obviously, my colleagues also who've helped to guide that plan after the consultation we've done. So if I can ask if there's anybody who's got any questions on the plan before I throw it over to my colleagues. Okay. So I think really all it leaves us now is to get to the formal bit. So we actually have to vote on the plan, so it's legal, and then we can start to implement it. So if I can ask my colleagues if we agree to the plan. We'll probably show of hands. Thank you. Great, brilliant. That's passed. So that actually ends the formal meeting. So we'll now be going into the workshop. So thank you all very, very much indeed for attending. I hope you will stay for these workshops on the 16th. It's on these tables. So once the meeting's finished, then we can, if you want to kind of gravitate to the table you fancy, and then we can get going. I think my colleagues know which tables they're on. So with that, thank you all very, very much indeed for coming, and we'll see you next time, hopefully. We don't know exactly when the next meeting is, but I guess sometime in June, hopefully. We're planning to have it in Netheredge. So thank you all very much indeed. Just to say, we're going to take half an hour of this, and then we'll come back together to see what's happened. So, thank you very much.
Suggestions focusing on people parking on grass verges and WR lines in Green Hill, and issues on Sheldon Road and other places, and asking for more 20-mile-hour zones. So very much kind of the themes that were identified in the initial consultation.
Cracking. Thank you. If I go to Kate.
Thank you. We went off piste as usual. So the two things we spent time talking about was firstly the importance of getting another neighbourhood action group set up in the Leadless Valley area to complement the two that are already in place, and what role that would play and how useful it would be in coordinating all sorts of things, including messaging, engagement. And then we spent some time actually linked to that, talking about Neighbourhood Watch, which is something which isn't actually in our, this takes our the actions in the community plan a bit further. And there was all sorts of conversations about what role that might fulfil. And there's in some areas there's people want more information about what's happening in their areas, and that's one route for actually being able to disseminate information. But then we started to talk about the other roles that Neighbourhood Watch used to play, and we sort of reached the conclusion that we need to refresh the whole volunteer base. It was still an important role for Neighbourhood Watch. And in fact, it would greatly benefit from some of the means of communication that have developed over COVID, including WhatsApp groups and a much better use of social media. So that's an action I think we would want to add in terms of implementing our aims of the community plan, and could be coordinated through the neighbourhood action group as well. So those were the two things that we discussed most of the time. Then we started to talk about the relevance of that to young people, and I think we need to think about that actually as well. So helping everybody to feel more secure, and it's not about scaring people really in terms of sharing information. It's actually about sharing information and also making people feel safer. That's my take on the discussion. Is that fair as far as the rest of the group's concerned? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Kate. Paul?
Thanks, Simon. We had a discussion that was with the same issues that have cropped up last time, really. There was the issue of litter, and litter specifically around the Bockham Parkway and the lack of bins in Graves Park. Somebody also mentioned that we should have a polluter pays policy for the litter. I think that means the people who produce the litter rather than the people who drop it. Is that right? Yeah. We also had a mention about floods, and that the repairs are made and then the floods still return the following year, so I guess that needs constant action. There was a comment about where are the solutions to climate change, because we've, as discussed, the community plan is a high-level plan, but there is work going on. I'm not going to defend the lack of action from the council, though. And then back to our two kind of main subjects, for the two main subjects at the last public meeting, which were about biodiversity and green spaces, and having a holistic approach for those things where they're mapped and connected, and to have a joined up strategy for them across not just the LAC but Sheffield as a whole. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. I think, is that feedback from all of the groups?
No, we haven't fed back, so we were a communities group, and we talked about how important community hubs are, and that is the most important thing in terms of we need to celebrate and advertise what's going on in your neighbourhood, and the best way of doing that is actually through a place that people know where it is, they can see it, they can go there and get the support they need. We did think that we did need something like a directory for the local groups to use, and then they can access information there which they can give to people, but Sheffield directory is not really fit for purpose. It's too clunky. There are better examples, such as that we can learn from, such as Sheffield's Flourish Mental Health Guide. Going back to community and how important place is, we need the local housing offices to be open again, and also we spoke about how there wasn't enough, we've lost so much money for community development budgets, and that is maybe something we can address at a LAC level. I don't know. Yeah, anything I've missed there?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much indeed.
Right, so this was children, young people and families, and we started with the possibility of having some street art in Batemore, which I think would be a great idea. But I think street art anywhere in the LAC is a really good idea. This is something that I think our youth service could pick up on and promote. We also talked about community hubs, because I think it's important, just like the previous group, that people know where to go for their activities, whatever that might be. The activities that came up were things like music and drama and art, because there's very, very little at the moment around that, especially for young people. So it was something that I'm going to be taking forward. I'm going to be talking to the Music Hub as a result of that. There are facilities around the LAC area, and it's important that we all know where they are and what they're doing. So we need to be able to collate that information, and what Alexi said about actually having a directory would be a great idea, so that people could put stuff in there when they've got an event coming up, and other people can look on there to see where the events are, and etc. That would be a really, really good idea. And I think the only other a couple of other things to mention, that young people need safe spaces, and I know again our youth service is beginning to get hold of that and provide some of those safe spaces. So again, I'll be liaising with our youth services. And the other thing was litter picking. I think that was one of the big things that we spoke about. It doesn't seem like, on the face of it, that this is a children, young people and families affair, but in fact, whenever I've been out litter picking, families come out. They do this in families. So this is quite a family-oriented thing. So, we were talking about creating litter picking groups around the area. I think that covers it. Look at that. Yeah.
Brilliant. Was there only 5 groups? I think there was. Great. Thank you very, very much indeed. Just to say, obviously, there's a lot more than has just been fed back there. What we will do is go through all of the discussions that you've had tonight, and work them into our future plans. We will be meeting hopefully in June, July. Hopefully earlier than that, when hopefully we'll be discussing what we're actually going to do and how we're going to do it. So with that, thank you all very, very much indeed for coming. Thank you very, very much indeed for taking part, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you all very much indeed. Bye.